Air Force One is designed to protect the president and remain airborne during the most extreme emergencies. But what secret procedures and protocols are in place if something goes wrong?
The threats that now exist are much more dramatic than they have been in the past.
While details are classified, Air Force One is armed with a series of safety features and military technology designed to ward off any potential attacks, including in-flight refueling capability, infrared missile and radar jamming technology, and top-secret anti-nuclear defenses.
Break, roll crown, this is Air Force One, patch complete, request you terminate, meet you System Bravo.
There are security provisions on Air Force One that the Air Force doesn't like to talk about. The countermeasures are really behind the engines so that they're designed to throw chaff into the air and heat-seeking missiles would be diverted from the plane. There is an electromagnetic skin on the plane designed to ward off impulses in case of a nuclear attack.
If Air Force One is threatened or the president's safety and security is threatened, the captain of Air Force One is ultimately responsible for that aircraft. And he makes decisions on what that aircraft should or should not do, and he knows better than anyone else on that aircraft what its capabilities are.
On September 11th, 2001, Air Force One was both a safe house and a moving target while transporting President George Bush out of Florida after the attacks in New York and Washington, D.C.
We took off, probably the quickest takeoff I'd ever experienced on Air Force One. There was a Condor Airlines plane in our vicinity that was not responding. So we had to turn the opposite direction.
The pilot, Officer Tillman, he got a transmission that there was an unidentified aircraft that might be following Air Force One, and that Angel, as they called it, might well be the next target of the terrorists.
People might not realize that that day someone called the White House and said, Angel is next, Angel being the code word for Air Force One.
There are all kinds of contingency plans built into the operation of Air Force One, including for nuclear war, but not for that kind of chaos.
This is Air Force One, request you terminate.
The pilot took evasive action, and he called for jet fighters. Because nobody knew what was going to happen and what the next target might be.
The threat turned out to be a false alarm, but it revealed secret weaknesses to Air Force One's capabilities.
Apparently, Air Force One has defensive measures, but it doesn't have an offensive capability. It doesn't shoot down other planes, which is why they need fighter escorts.
People wonder, well, how often is Air Force One accompanied by fighter jets, escorts? Very rarely, almost never, because it interferes with not only commercial traffic, but it causes a safety problem because they have to clear a swath in the sky for Air Force One, and then they have to clear the swath for the fighter planes and their approaches. The Air Force has decided that they could scramble jets at the last minute to be with Air Force One. So whenever Air Force One is traveling, the Air Force knows exactly where it's going. And so pilots are on alert.
In the wake of the 2001 terrorist attacks, emergency protocols were engaged, allowing Air Force One to safely deliver President Bush to a secret location in Nebraska.
Why Nebraska? Because that's where the Strategic Air Command is headquartered.
We went to Offutt Air Force Base, just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. We pulled up to this large building, 3-4-story building as I recall. But instead of going into the building, across the street from the building was a concrete bunker. And that's actually where we went in. And at that point, I we'll have to leave it at that.
After the events of September 11th, President Bush ordered critical improvements to Air Force One to upgrade the military aircraft's communication capabilities.
Within a week of that day, President Bush ordered the Air Force to put live television on board and to figure out a way to get internet capability for the airplane, to do live meetings with his staff on the ground via the internet.
Test 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. How copy now?
And that is the precursor to all the internet that you have on airlines today.
But while Air Force One is the premier aircraft for presidential transport, if there's a national emergency and the Commander-in-Chief comes under attack in the White House, it is Marine One, the presidential helicopter that is the first vehicle called to action. The Sea King is thought to be equipped with ballistic armor and anti-missile defenses.
Does the Marine One aircraft have the ability to attack or defend itself? Well, simply said, some secrets must remain secret.
Those responsible for moving the president are drilled in emergency evacuation protocols.
I can tell you with firsthand experience because I stood in for the president on one of those drills, and it was a highlight of my career down there. The idea, if nuclear weapons are en route Washington, D.C., is to get the president out of town as fast as possible. Get him into an area where he is safe and can continue to run the government. And there's a program called Continuity of Government, COG, and it's designed to do just that. So during a continuity of government exercise one time, I played the president. I got into the presidential helicopter and flew to a secret location in the mountains near Camp David.
Allowing the president to make a quick getaway is why a helicopter was added to the fleet. When the Commander-in-Chief is on board, the chopper flies under the call sign Marine One.
Marine One came into being around 1957. And the reason was, what if you were the president and you wanted to get somewhere fairly quickly, more quickly than in a car, but you really couldn't fire up a big presidential plane? The ideal answer was the helicopter. And Marine One never flies alone. There are always other decoy helicopters flying with it. Deception is part of the art of protecting presidents.
Unlike the cramped helicopters used by his predecessors, President Obama's Sea King has nearly 200 square feet of interior space. The plush cabin has room for 14 passengers and features a small office space and a bathroom. Marine One also has room for the communications equipment required to keep the president in contact with the Pentagon and White House at all times.
The communications are all similar, and we can interact with all of the White House communications. Although the cabin is very comfortable and spacious, there are limited facilities on board. So it's all mission dependent, and they may take additional medical equipment on certain flights in certain areas.
If an emergency situation does arise, Marine One has several high-tech security features, including a reinforced aluminum alloy fuselage capable of withstanding high-speed crash impacts, the ability to continue flying even if one of its 3 engines fails, and the latest military-grade laser detector and radar warning systems. Military protocol for a presidential helicopter flight includes a Marine assigned to meet the president wherever he lands. On a trip to a remote area in the Grand Canyon, President Bill Clinton was greeted at dawn by a solitary Marine standing at attention, ready to serve his Commander-in-Chief.
Clinton was genuinely surprised in such a remote area to see Marines standing there. He didn't know why.
When the president comes out, he will give him the appropriate greeting, and then he remains with that aircraft, providing the security for that aircraft.
Marine One's importance to the presidency is reflected in the fact that the helicopter is transported overseas on every trip made by the president.
Overseas operations are much more difficult because the aircraft have to be flown to an Air Force base, disassembled, flown to the location overseas, assembled, and then prepared for the presidential mission.
But Marine One isn't the only vehicle traveling with the president. He also flies with a heavily armored limousine called the Beast.